So we've had the opportunity to see some demonstrations. We've had the opportunity to practice a little bit. I'm going to talk about offering your perspective. And if you're like me, and I've done a lot of coaching training, one of the most difficult things for coaches to get is, when do I offer my perspective? How much do I offer? You want to get in there and make some things happen. So here's some guidelines on how do we offer perspective appropriately. So the first thing is the one when the other person has already come up with a few options. So you're in the options phase, you're working through that, and they've already come up with a few, but they get kind of stuck. You don't want to jump in too soon. You really ask the question, but then there's a common point in time where you can throw a couple of options out, and you might even offer the option and then turn it back and say, okay, now then, what would you do from there? So now they give them an option, but then let them begin to you have to help them own it after that. So that would be something good. And then the other thing is, another time is when you have relevant experience that the other person doesn't have. I think that's an appropriate time then to offer some perspective when you've got some relevant experience. When you have knowledge of tools or resources that may be helpful. So if someone's working on something and you know of a resource or a tool that could be helpful, that's a perfect time to just let them have that tool, and then they can go ahead and process it and make it work for them. When you've observed the other person in action and can provide feedback. This isn't always the case in coaching, but when you have the opportunity to watch somebody actually operate in action, then that's a good time to offer some feedback specifically to what you saw. And then the other one, when the other person asks for your point of view. That's a great time, because oftentimes that's going to happen. And when somebody asks, you go ahead and offer your point of view. And Jeff, so if you choose to offer your perspective, okay, now how do you do that? What's the best way to consider that?
Okay, a few suggestions. If you choose to offer your perspective, first, ask for permission to offer your point of view. Don't just assume that the other person wants your opinion. Just say, is it okay? I have a little bit of perspective I'd like to add. And that also helps you to not derail their buy-in and their ownership by saying, is it okay if I give you a little bit of my perspective? And then another suggestion is offer your thoughts in small doses and be specific. So don't give the other person a 3-minute rant of everything that you want to say. Don't dump the whole load on them. Just think of some very specific things that would be relevant and just share those in small doses. So keep it simple, keep it very focused. And then keep in mind, the third point, be intentional to not diminish the other person's buy-in. And that's why it's so important to not bring your perspective until later in the conversation, until the other person, as Jerry explained, has had plenty of time to process their options. So be mindful that you don't dominate with your point of view so that they begin to diminish their level of buy-in, because you're going to have a less effective development process if that occurs. And then here's the last point, and this was really the golden rule. If you've said everything you wanted to say, you probably said too much. So if you leave that conversation thinking, I'm glad I got all that off my chest, then you probably went way too far. If you leave the conversation feeling, I wish I could have shared just a little bit more, then chances are you stayed at the appropriate level of bringing your perspective, and you allowed that other person to maintain their level of buy-in. So just keep those in mind. Now, as you end the conversation, it's really important that you lead people to choose really good goals so they know exactly what next steps they're going to take. So, Jerry, how do you set a good goal? How do you help a person do that?
Well, I think it's important to set some goals, because if you're like me at all, you get a project or something you have to do, and oftentimes you'll put it off until that, just a little while before the due date, right? I mean, there are some of you out there that you're the people that get started right away and get it done beforehand. But most people honestly kind of have a tendency to wait till the last minute. So you really want to help them be successful by providing some clear goals and some clear structure to those. So what we use the acronym SMART. And maybe you've heard of SMART goals before, but what we want to do is we want to use this SMART goal thought to help people come up with some real tangible, concrete things that they can do in a way that help them win moving forward. Because remember, you actually have to, it doesn't really work unless somebody takes some action steps associated with it. So what are SMART goals? First thing is the S, specific. They want to be specific goals. So if someone has some vague things, you want to ask them questions so they narrow it down and get very specific. You want to make them measurable. Right? You can't know if you're doing them or not if they're not measurable, so make sure that they're measurable goals. The other thing is you want to make sure they're attainable. Sometimes people can be overly aggressive and unrealistic when they set a goal. So as a coach, I think it's important for you to help them something that they can attain so that they'll get confidence from that and then move forward. All right. The third thing is, or fourth thing is, R is relevant. You want it to be relevant to the issue. So as a coach, you just want to make sure that the goal that they're coming up with is actually relevant to the issue at hand that you've talked about. And then finally, you want to make them time bound. You want to put some time limitation on that. So when you end a conversation, the person's going to know, I'm going to do this. This is why I'm going to do it. And this is how I'm going to know I'm successful. And this is when I'm going to get it done. And when you end up with that point in the conversation, then that person has some clear steps to begin to move forward in solving the problem. And as a people developer, that's where it's at, is helping people win. And that's what it's all about. So, Jeff?
Okay, it's time for you guys now to dive back in and have the second half of your practice coaching conversation, and then we'll come back and wrap it up.